Greetings, Peter. This is your father, Tim Lampley, through Paraclete Academy, instructing you in your MATH09 course, Essential Mathematics with Applications. We will be using this format. We'll be using what's called a flipped classroom format, and there'll be more details and description about that later in this video presentation about what that is and what that means to you, but we'll be using that typically. Typically, these video lectures will be about 30 minutes long. This one may be a little bit longer because we've got some introductions and we have some recap based on the previous lessons or on the previous objectives of the section that we're currently in right now. So it'll be a little bit longer on this one, but you'll also have it as a record to go back and review, with your notes and things like that, okay? So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, Essential Mathematics with Applications, Paraclete Academy, MATH09. So we will, as I've discussed here, be using a flipped classroom format. So flipped classroom, what's that? Well, the typical classroom format is where the instructor prepares material to be delivered in the classroom. And what happens is the students and the teacher get together. The teacher provides a lecture going over that prepared material. Students listen to that information and take notes. And then they demonstrate their understanding of the lectured material by completing homework and getting a satisfactory grade on that homework, which is supposed to show that they understand the material that was lectured upon. Okay, a flipped classroom is different. It kind of completely turns it around. So what I'll be doing is I'll be creating and teaching a lesson in a video presentation format for you to view during the daytime hours while I'm at work. And students will be learning that lesson outside of class time by watching the video that I'll prepare. You'll also, during the time that we get together, which will be our class time, you'll be working on your homework, your quizzes, and your tests during that class time, and I'll be there to provide support while you're doing your homework. So if you need any, have any questions that you need answered about the lecture, if you need help in applying those concepts, I will be present and there to help you. So basically, away from our meeting together, you'll be looking at the video lectures to learn the lesson. And then when we get together to meet, or meeting time, otherwise known as class time, that's when you'll actually be spending time completing the homework assignment. And I'll be there to provide assistance to you and to help you apply those concepts that you're learning. Okay? So let's go ahead and move forward. So each presentation is going to basically have this overview. Okay? So the presentation is going to include a quick review of the last lesson. Now, any details, you'll need to actually go back and view that video to get the detailed information. So I'm just going to be providing a quick review since our videos are only about 30 minutes long, okay? The second part of the presentation is going to be the new lesson lecture. So in that lecture, I'm going to include the section concepts, and then I'll also be providing some examples that we'll be working through, okay? The third part will be the homework assignment and the meeting times. Now, just remember that the homework is actually going to be worked on in class, okay? So that's when we'll be working through it, and then you can turn it in at the end of the homework session, okay? And then, of course, remember that the presentation videos will be 30 minutes, okay? So let's go ahead and let's move forward to our review of section 1.4. That's the current section that we're in, section 1.4, multiplication of whole numbers. And you have three objectives in this section. So at the end of this section, by the time you've completed it, you as a student should be able to do the following things. Objective A would be to multiply a number by a single digit. Objective B would be to multiply larger whole numbers, okay? And then objective C would be to solve application problems. Application problems are important because they teach us how to use the math that we're learning in real-world situations. Why are we learning all this stuff? Well, application problems show us why we are. Okay, so we're going to be completing a review of objective A and B, since we've already covered that, and then the new lecture in this video presentation will cover objective C. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. So our quick review will be in regards to objective A and objective B. Objective A was to multiply a number by a single digit, and objective B is to multiply larger whole numbers. So let's remember that the definition of multiplication is the repeated addition of the same number. So here's an example. Now Peter has a business selling iPhones. Okay, each box contains 8 iPhone 7 Plus cells. So Peter has a business selling iPhones, and each box contains 8 iPhone 7 Plus smartphones. Okay, Peter ordered 8 boxes to stock his store. How many iPhones did Peter order? So this is important. He would need to know how many phones he ordered in total. Okay, so from here, looking at the application problem, we know the following things. 1, we know that Peter ordered 6 boxes of iPhones. We also know, 2, that each box contains 8 iPhones. So if we draw it out and we use picture math or we use symbols, we can see that we have 6 boxes. Okay, now let's remember that each box contains 8 iPhones. Okay, so let's convert the pictures to numbers. So we just take each box, but we remember what's inside each box, which are 8 iPhones, and we take that, and we know that that comes up with a certain total. Okay, so let's note something. Let's notice that the number 8 has been repeated a number of times. In this case, 8 was repeated 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, using addition, we can add each 8 together to solve the problem. So we can 8, and we can add each of these together, and then come up with 48. Okay, or we can use multiplication to speed up the process. So here we have 8 iPhones in each box, repeated 6 times for the boxes, and that equals 48. So 8 times 6 equals 48. Here we see that 8 multiplied by 6 is equal to 48. So remember the definition. Multiplication is the repeated addition of the same number. In this case, 8 is repeated 6 times. Okay. So let's also remember that, like addition and subtraction, multiplication has its own names or titles for each part of its problems. So for example 2 here, we see that 8 times 6 equals 48. Well, these numbers that are being multiplied together are called factors. So factors are the numbers that are multiplied together. But the total, or the sum, or the answer, after multiplying the factors together, that's called the product. So you have factors and you have products. Okay. Also, by way of quick preview, we have multiplication properties. Now, it's really important, Peter, that you remember the multiplication properties, because in remembering them, you can rely on them to help you sort of shortcut or remember quicker some things. For an example, with the multiplication property of 0, we see that any number multiplied by 0 is 0. So for an example here, we have a variable, which means any given number, multiplied by 0 equals 0. Therefore, because of the multiplication property of 0, I don't have to calculate. I don't have to waste my mental energy calculating and multiplying whatever number by 0. Thanks to the multiplication property of 0, resting and relying upon that fact, I can just say 1,255,362 multiplied by 0 is 0. I don't have to do any sort of calculations at all. And it's the same thing with the multiplication property of 1. Any number multiplied by 1 is the number. So it doesn't matter, and I've written that over here for the property examples, a being a variable, which just symbolizes any given whole number, multiplied by 1 equals a. So it doesn't matter what a is. It could be 100, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,000,000. When I multiply it by 1, it'll be that number. Okay? And then we have the commutative property. okay, of multiplication, which states that two numbers can be multiplied in any order, the product will be the same. So I come over to the example, and I see that 3 multiplied by 2 equals 6. So if I know this, if I know that 3 multiplied by 2 equals 6, I also know that 2 multiplied by 3 is 6. It doesn't matter what order I multiply those two numbers in, the product or the answer will remain the same. Now the last property to keep in mind is the associative property of multiplication. So here I see that grouping the numbers to be multiplied in any order gives the same result. Okay, so from here I can see in this example that if I have 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3 is equal to 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3, and you'll notice that the parentheses show that I have the 1 multiplied by 2 grouped over here, and on the other side of that equation I have the 2 multiplied by 3 grouped together. With the order of operations, we know that anything that's in parentheses, we multiply or do that operation first. So 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, multiplied by 3 is 6. And then from here, we do this part first. So 3 times 2, or 2 times 3, excuse me, is 6, multiplied by 1 is 6. 6 is equal to 6. So it doesn't matter how I group the numbers and in what order I multiply them, the product is going to be the same. I'm going to get the same results. So, son, just remember that if you'll commit those properties to memory, and then when you're doing calculations and putting those numbers together and you recognize that you see those certain properties in action, it could speed up your calculations. Really, really important to understand. Okay, so let's go ahead right now and just take a quick moment to just do a couple of problems for objective A to multiply a number by a single digit. Let's go ahead and take a moment to do that. Okay, so for objective A, we see that we're supposed to multiply a number by a single digit. So if we have our multiplication facts memorized, that really, really helps us here. So for an example, if I have here, if I have here 5 times 7, I know that 5 times 7 is 35. Incidentally, for extra credit, son, I also know due to the commutative property of multiplication that 7 times 5 is also 35. But here, let's go ahead and kind of make this a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at this and make this a little bit more practical for us here. So if I have 623 and I multiply that times 4, okay, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to write the numbers. I'm going to put them in their proper place value areas, right? And then I'm going to perform the calculation. So I know that 4 times 3 equals 12. So I write the one digit here, and I carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8, plus the 1 that I carried, that equals 9. And then 4 times 6 is 24. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that number right here. Okay, so I see that 623 multiplied by 4 is 2,492. Okay, let's go ahead and let's just pick another problem here real quick. Okay, so from here, if I have 127 and I need to multiply that by 9, I have here that 9 times 7 is 63. So I write the 3, I carry the 6. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 6 is 24. And then 9 times 1 is 9, plus 2 is 11. So 127 multiplied by 9 is 1,143. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll do one more. So I have 703 multiplied by 9. So I write the numbers as I'm supposed to. I write them with the place values as they're supposed to be. Okay, and then I start from the bottom and multiply up, and I have to multiply across. Okay, with the first number I write in the column. So since this is the ones column or place value, I'm going to start the number here. So 9 times 3 I know to be 27. And I'm going to take the 2, and I'm going to carry that over. So I know that 9 times 0, now because of the multiplication property of 0, I know automatically that any number multiplied by 0 is 0. So 9 times 0 is 0, but I can't just write the number down. I have a number that's carried. I need to add that. So 9 times 0 is 0 plus 2. 0 plus 2 is 2. And then right here, I have 9 times 7, which is 63. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write that number. Okay, so 703 multiplied by 9 is 6,327. So let's go ahead and go back to the lecture. Okay, so after doing the quick review of the multiplication operation for multiplying a number by a single digit, let's go ahead and go to the second objective real quick, which is to multiply larger whole numbers. So let's go ahead real quick and take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at what some larger multiplication problems would look like. Oops, sorry about the flash of light there. Okay, so we'll just start off with a real basic one here. So we see that 18, okay, multiplied by 24. So we're still going to do the same thing. We're still going to take the numbers. We're going to write them up according to their place values, right, according to their columns, okay? And then we're going to take each digit and multiply it across. So let me explain. So from here we have 4 times 8, okay? So 4 times 8 is 32. So we're going to write 2, carry the 3, okay? And we carry the 3 up to the next digit because we still have to multiply that, right? So we have 4 times 1, and I automatically know from the multiplication property of 1 that any number, any given number, multiplied by 1 is the number. So 4 times 1 equals 4, but I have this number up here that I have to add to it, right? Because I carried it over. I can't leave it there. So 4 plus 3, so 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So I've finished multiplying this one across. Now I have to take this digit and I have to also multiply it across. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a slash through the 3 so I don't get confused and I don't forget that I've already used that. I'm going to say 2 times 8, or 2 multiplied by 8, or 2 repeated 8 times, if you will, is 16. So I'm going to go ahead and write the 6 down, and then I'm going to write the 1 here. Now, why am I writing that here? Because this is the last digit, or the next digit, that I need to multiply. So I want to make sure that I don't forget that I need to add this back into everything, or I'm going to get a wrong answer. So from here, 2 times 1, I automatically know, multiplication property of 1, that it's 2 plus 1 is 3. I'm going to write that across, draw a line, and then from here, I'm going to add these, okay? So 2, and this is the same thing as having a 0. So 2 plus 0 is 2. 7 plus 6 is 13. 1 plus 3 is 4. Okay, so 18 multiplied by 24 is 432. Okay, let's go ahead and let's pick another one, okay? So from here, let's go ahead and pick 688 multiplied by 674. And maybe what I might need to do actually is take this and give myself a little bit more room. So 688 multiplied by 674. Let's go ahead and get to work. So we're going to line them up according to their place values, right? And we're going to make columns of that, right? So 4 multiplied by 8 is 32. I'm going to carry the 3. 4 multiplied by 8 is 32. Plus 3 is 35. So I'm going to take the 5 and I'm going to carry the 3. I'm going to cross that out so I don't get confused. 4 multiplied by 6 is 24. Plus 3 is 27. I'm going to write that across. So I'm done with this one. Now I got to multiply this across, starting here. So 7 multiplied by 8. 7 times 8 is 54. Okay. 7 times 8 is 54. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Okay. The 7 times 8 is 54. It's actually 56. So let me just go ahead and make that correction here. Okay, so 7 times 8 is 56. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say 7 times 8 is 56. Okay, plus 5, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 61. Okay, we're going to carry the 6. So 7 times 6 is 42. Plus 6, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48. Doing that for your benefit, of course. So from here, but we're not done yet, right? So here, I have to go ahead and I have to actually continue to multiply cross with this number. So I'm going to cross these out just to make sure I don't get confused. So 6 times 8 is 48. And my 4 goes right here. Okay. And then 6 times 8 is 48. Plus 4 is 52. So 6 times 6 is 36. Plus 5 is 41. And now we're going to add these. So 2 plus 0 is 2. 6 and 5 is 11. So 8. 7 plus 1 is 8, so 8 and 8 are 16, plus 1 is 17. 8 and 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11, plus 2 is 13. 4 plus 2, 4 plus 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6, and then 4. Okay, so remember from our previous lessons that after every 3 digits, you put a comma. Okay. So we see that 688 multiplied by 674 equals 463,712. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the lecture. Okay, so now that we've actually gone ahead and reviewed objectives A and objective B, let's go ahead and let's shoot straight to the new lesson lecture. Okay, so objective B we've just done. Objective A we've just covered. Now, let's do objective C. So objective C is to solve application problems. So one, let's remember, Peter, that application problems, or word problems as they're also known by, show us there is a reason why we are learning math. Okay. In other words, application problems help us to see that we can use the math we are learning to solve real-world problems. For an example, there was a situation in that one problem, that application problem that we had at the beginning of the lecture here, of our review, if you will. And that application problem was that Peter had a cell phone business and that he had ordered 6 boxes of iPhone 7 Pluses. Each box contained 8 iPhones. So having a business, you're going to want to know how many phones that you ordered so you can make sure that you're able to sell them, so you can make sure that you don't run out of product, so you can continue to sell and make money. So why am I learning multiplication? Why am I learning addition? Well, in that one instance that problem provided, so that you are able to determine how many iPhones you ordered so you can continue to do business and make money. So we need to remember that each application problem provides us with clues to help us determine what mathematical operations we are to use to solve the problem. Okay, so an application problem is like a mystery. And as you read the information that's contained in the application problem, it provides us clues to figure out how to solve the problem. Let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so one thing that we need to remember is that there are words and phrases that we should know and pay attention to help us understand that multiplication will be used to solve the problem. We learned that for addition. We learned that for subtraction. It's not any different for multiplication. Okay, so for an example, somewhere, if you read somewhere within the application problem times, you know that that's a tip-off that you're going to be using multiplication as an operation somewhere in the problem. Okay, so for an example, 7 times 3, and then writing that in standard form. Now, the reason why, Peter, I'm using an asterisk is because for a computer, it makes it, that's another form of multiplication, at least when we're using a computer. So you can use an X, you can use a dot, you can use parentheses, you can use an asterisk, such as right here, or a star, if you will. It's an asterisk, though. So there's different ways of expressing the operation of multiplication. If you see a phrase that says the product of, such as, for an example, the product of 6 and 9, you know that you're using multiplication of those two factors, 6 and 9. If you see the phrase multiplied by, you also are being tipped off, such as, for an example, 8 multiplied by 2, that you're using the operation called multiplication. Okay? So looking for those phrases within your application problem will help you know whether multiplication is an operation that you're going to be using to solve the application problem. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's look at some application problems. Okay? So example 3 here. Okay, so page 28 in your textbook. It's not necessary for you to look at that because I have it here in the lecture, but if you wanted to, you could. Okay, so here's the problem. An auto mechanic receives a salary of $1,050 each week. How much does the auto mechanic earn in 4 weeks? Okay, so I'm going to provide you with a strategy or step list to solve application problems, but in particular multiplication application problems. Okay, so the strategy on how to solve this problem would be: 1, make a list of what we know. So the first thing that we know is we know that this auto mechanic earns $1,050 every week. Okay, and there isn't any other information that is provided in this particular problem, so that's where we're at. Okay. Step 2 of your strategy would be to determine the problem you're supposed to solve. What is it that you're looking for? What's the problem? What's the answer that you need to be finding? And it tells us here in the second sentence of the application problem, how much does the auto mechanic earn in 4 weeks? So what are we supposed to determine? Well, we're supposed to find out how much salary the mechanic earns in 4 weeks. Okay. So let's continue. Now, step 3 would be to process and convert the known information into the correct math operation. Okay, so let's think about this, because remember, math is about not just understanding, but processing the information, right? Making sure that we understand it. So let's go through the thought process of how to solve this problem. So the first thing we know is that the auto mechanic makes $1,050 of salary each week. Okay. We also know that we need to find out how much salary the auto mechanic makes in 4 weeks. So here we can use logic to determine that we can repeat that weekly salary of $1,050 4 times to get the answer. That is, if he makes $1,050 salary per week, and we need to find out how much he makes in 4 weeks, we know that we can repeat $1,050 4 times and get that answer. Okay, so that would indicate that we need to use multiplication to solve the problem. So the second part, part B of the process, is we need to convert that known information that we've been thinking about and processing into the correct math operation, which would be multiplication. So here we see that 1,050 times 4 is taking that information that we learned, or that we know from reading the problem, and taking it and changing that information into the right math operation, which is multiplication. 1,050 times 4. And then C would be to perform the math operation to solve that problem. So let's go ahead and let's do that and see what that looks like. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So we have 1,050. So that's the salary that he makes. Okay. And then what we need to do is we need to repeat that or multiply that by 4. So he makes 1,050 per week. We need to see how much he makes in 4 weeks. So we're going to multiply that by 4. So let's go ahead and do that. 4 multiplied by 0, and we automatically know, due to the multiplication property of 0, that this is 0. Don't even need to think about it. 4 times 5 is 20. So we're going to go ahead and write the 0 here and then carry the 2. 4 times 0 we know to be 0. plus 2 is 2. And then 4 times 1, due to the multiplication operation of 1, the multiplication property of 1, we know that to be 4. So 4 times 1 is 4. Okay? So, we're supposed to find out how much salary the auto mechanic makes in 4 weeks. So, in 4 weeks, the auto mechanic makes $4,200 salary. And there's our answer. Let's go ahead and go back to the lecture. Okay, so we performed the math operation to solve the problem, and we've determined that $1,050 that the auto mechanic makes every week multiplied by 4, repeated 4 times, is $4,200. That's what the auto mechanic makes in a month or in 4 weeks. Okay, so let's continue. So the second example, or the next example, would be the following. So a press operator earns $640 for working a 40-hour week. This week, the press operator also worked 7 hours of overtime at $26 an hour. Find the press operator's total pay for the week. So the strategy, let's go ahead and apply the strategy. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to make a list of what we know from the problem. So reading the sentence, a press operator earns $640 for working a 40-hour week. This week, the press operator also worked 7 hours of overtime at $26 an hour. So the things that we know that we can pull from the problem is that A, the press operator earns $640 for a 40-hour work week. Okay. The second thing that we know is that the press operator worked 7 hours of overtime. The third thing that we know is that the overtime pay is at $26 per hour. Okay, so those are the things that we know. Then what we need to do is step 2, or strategy 2, is we need to determine the problem we're supposed to solve. So the problem that we're supposed to solve, as we look at the problem here, states find the press operator's total pay for the week. Okay, so if we do that, then what we need to do is we need to write that down or have an idea of that. And then we go to step 3. So step 3 says process and convert known information into the correct math operation. So here's the thought process. The thought process is that the press operator earns $640 per 40-hour work week, okay? The second thing that we know is that the press operator also worked 7 hours of overtime at $26 per hour. Okay, so what we need to do in our thought process is we need to multiply $26 by 7 to find out how much overtime the press operator made. And then we have to remember a very important part. We're not done there. We need to remember that we need to find the total pay, because remember, total means add what the press operator made for the week. So we need to find the total pay the press operator made. So that means that 1, we're going to need to add overtime pay to the press operator's normal weekly salary in order for us to get the total pay. So let's see what that looks like. So here we are. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. So we know that at $26 an hour, the press operator worked 7 hours of overtime. And we also know that per 40-hour work week, the press operator earns $640 per week. So first what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how much overtime he made. So the overtime that the press operator made, 6 times 7 is 42, or 7 times 6, excuse me, is 42. So we're going to write the 2, carry the 4. And then 7 times 2 is 14, plus 4 is 18. So we now know that the press operator made $182 of overtime pay. But remember, we're asked to find the total amount that they made. that the press operator made that week. So with the overtime, we're going to need to take that overtime and we're going to need to add that. So we come over to 640 because we know that that's how much the press operator makes per 40-hour work week. We're going to add the overtime to that. So here we come back and do the operation of addition. 0 plus 2 we know to be 2. 8 plus 4 is 12. And then 6 plus 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8. So the answer to the problem is that this week, including the 40-hour work week and the 7 hours of overtime that the press operator makes at $26 an hour, the operator made a total of $822. $822 for that work week, including overtime. Let's go back to the lecture. Okay, so we see that we had to calculate the $26 per hour, and we had to repeat that 7 times in order to get the overtime pay amount of $182. And then we had to take that and add that to the press operator's weekly salary amount of $640, perform that math operation to solve the problem, and see that the total pay for the press operator, including overtime, was $822.00. Okay? So the lecture recap. So this is a lecture recap as we're just in brief, we go over what we've covered. Okay? So real quick, the recap is just about Objective C, which is to solve application problems. The application problem, we need to remember that application problems, teach us how to use math and the math that we are learning to solve real-world problems. The application strategy is a 4-part process, even though there's some sub-processes in between. So if we can break them down into 4 sections, which state 1, we need to make a list of what we know. And what we know is based upon what we're able to read and gather from the application problem itself. 2, we determine the problem that we need to solve, and that information is also contained within the application problem. The third thing we need to do is we need to process and convert that information that we know to a math operation we're going to perform. Okay, so we can look at that step 1, figure out what we need to do, and convert that information to a math operation that we actually perform. And then step 4 is to perform the operation and solve the problem. Okay, there's always a hidden step, son, that I've always talked to you about, and it's always to check your work. If you're not sure about that, you could just go through the process again and just kind of multiply it and just check it and make sure that you didn't make any mistakes, okay? Like I did when I looked and saw and made the wrong calculation for that multiplication that I was doing before, okay? So, homework assignment, okay? We're at the last part of our lecture here. We're only about 8 minutes over, so that's not too shabby. Okay, so the homework assignment. So, the first thing that you need to do, son, is you need to review the lecture and make notes to use in class, okay? Review this lecture, listen to it, make sure you're familiar with the information, okay? If you have any questions about how to do anything, you need to go back to this lecture, you need to take notes, and use those notes, okay, when you come to class, okay? So the next thing is the homework assignment. So the homework assignment, and I have it written here for you, is section 1.4 exercises, Objective C, pages 31 to 32, problems 96 to 105, every other odd, okay? Now note, these problems will be worked on during class meeting, okay? So you could certainly look at them if you want, but we're going to actually do the work in class together, work through those, and make sure that you're understanding the concepts, that you're able to understand, process, apply, and remember. So the next class meeting is going to be Wednesday, December the 5th, 2018, and that's going to be somewhere around the 6 o'clock mark, okay? If you have any questions about this, so if you have any questions, step 1 is to look at the lecture again and see if you can get the information from the lecture. If you're still not able, if you're still not clear after looking at the lecture, write your questions down so that we can review them during class time, because that's what class time is about. Class time now with a flipped classroom paradigm or a format is you learn outside of class, and when we come to class, we work on the homework with the information that you've learned, and I'm there to support you just to make sure that you understand the concepts and we work through it, okay? So this has been a blast, and I will see you Wednesday at that 6 o'clock mark or so. Love you, son. Good night.